Uchronia's preeminent songstress Juani Cygnus, otherwise known as Junah, is probably the definition of the word iconic. One only needs to hear a few of her voice lines to agree with this statement.
Tremble before me! I've got just the dance for you. You might say it's to die for. Power can be so intoxicating. I'll give you the performance of a lifetime. Not bad, eh? I feel a song coming on. Applause, please.
But I worry that her iconic nature has led to her being misunderstood and, quite frankly, underrated by most people who play this game. The irony of this, of course, is that this is pretty meta if you consider that a core part of Junah's character is her efforts to make people misunderstand her. This might not make sense now, but let's head back to Uchronia and discuss. I think when it comes to Junah's story within this game, one of the best decisions they made was to only reveal to you her past pretty far down the line in her social link. This means that you spend the majority of your time with her basically assuming that she is a certain way. And what way is that? Junah comes across for the entire game as a debonair, uber-confident person who fears nothing and nobody. She's somebody who has the power to sway anybody's heart that she encounters and overcome any trial that she faces. This is most reflected in the fact that Mirtis, who literally hates Junah, likes her and respects her by the end of her social link, and also how Junah is able to root herself in Luis's inner circle. Yeah, Luis, the guy who deliberately forms bonds with nobody and is single-minded on his mission and path to end the world. The last and probably most obvious evidence that Junah is a debonair icon is the fact that she's one of the most famous people on the continent due to her beauty and singing talent. But here's the thing. When you apply the context of Junah's past and read between the lines on a few of the things that she says, you will find that at her core, she is potentially the most human character in the game, not an unrelatable demigoddess who's never known adversity. Let's start with her past. As a child, Junah was a slave. This culminated in Junah being tied up to a tree as some twisted form of punishment for days on end. Eventually, she was found and adopted into House Cygnus, a powerful Sanctus Ishkia house. I want to pause here because I think this is a very important intersection in Junah's life. You see, Junah is very pure in that at her core, she just wants to make the world a better place. And this desire to help others, to give hope to others, is rooted in both her time as a slave and from her relationship with Rella. To elucidate, when Junah was tied up to the tree, the only thing that kept her going was singing. And so through her song, she wants to give hope to others. That's the main reason that she sings. She feels that music literally saved her life as it gave her the will to live when she was at her lowest point. Now, in terms of getting adopted into House Cygnus, of course this is how she became Rella's adopted little sister. As we know, Rella is known as Saint Rella. She's beloved by the kingdom because she spent many years healing people in need with no conditional expectations of payment or anything in return. So I wanted to stop at this intersection because you can clearly see from here how the core of Junah's ideals was formed. She sings to inspire hope in others because of how singing got her through horrible experiences as a child, and she's extremely passionate about making the world a better place, in part due to her proximity to her sister Rella over the years and seeing the way that she worked tirelessly to help people in need. You could understand that when a person like Rella tells Junah to sing so that her voice may reach the most people possible, that could really light a fire in you. An example of these ideals being displayed in Confluence is when she sings for a child when she doesn't need to, and she says yes to perform for the merchant's laborers in an irrelevant event when she doesn't need to. And on top of that, she wants her pay to go to the audience. So we've defined Junah's motivations and how they formed. But there's another component to Junah that we must discuss, and that is that she is Nidia. Of course, the clan secret of the Nidia people is that they are essentially shapeshifters. Their true form is physically that of a small child, and nobody sees this form except for their birth parents. As soon as they're old enough, they begin to transform. So, Nidia people hide their true selves for their entire lives. Let's unpack this. How would you feel if the entire world told you that your true authentic self was an embarrassment and that they didn't want you to show it at all in public? If the world basically said, don't come outside unless you're wearing a mask? How would you feel if then, after that, the world fell in love with you with your mask on? But you're hyper aware of the fact that you're wearing a mask and what they love isn't you in your natural state. Well, while a variety of mental health issues could stem from said circumstances, you'd be likely to develop some form of imposter syndrome. If you don't know, imposter syndrome is when you doubt your own skills and successes. You feel you're not as talented or worthy as others believe, and you're scared that one day people will realize that. This is something that affects a lot of people in real life, and due to her circumstances, we can see this at play within Junah. Her early formative years as a slave were spent being told by the world that she was less than nothing and not good enough. Working in conjunction with that is her status as a Nidia, where the implication of their transformation is that the world doesn't approve of what they truly are. I want to pause here and briefly talk about where I'm certain some of the inspiration for Junah's character came from. I don't know if you've heard of this story, but it's a pretty famous Danish fairy tale from 1843 called The Ugly Duckling. To oversimplify it, basically there's a duckling that hatches out of its egg and faces adversity everywhere it goes. It suffers abuses from the other animals until it encounters a flock of migrating swans. It tries to join them and is shocked when the swans welcome and accept it. It sees its reflection in the water and realizes that it wasn't an ugly duckling, but a beautiful swan the entire time. It then takes flight with its new swan family. So obviously this journey mirrors Junah's extremely closely. She was an unwanted child who suffered the abuse of slavery until eventually she was found and adopted into House Cygnus. By the time we meet Junah, she's the most famous songstress in the world, heralded for her beauty. The theme of the ugly duckling lines up and resonates with Junah's struggles as well, because a major theme of the ugly duckling story is to accept people for their qualities and values, not for their appearance. The story's message is that appearances are misleading and that it's better to accept someone for their good qualities than their physical looks. This obviously lines up seamlessly with the dilemma of the Nidia people, that they feel that they must transform so that the world pays attention to their qualities and not their physical looks. This is where there's a slight difference in the parallel between Junah and the ugly duckling though, because in the story, the ugly duckling was actually a swan the entire time. In Junah's case, her appearance the world fell in love with is actually a mask metaphorically speaking, and in the same way she's an adopted Cygnus, she's not actually a swan herself. Even though her mask is authentically her, it is still a standard Nidia guise. If you're sitting there feeling like I'm reaching bringing this story up, then I want to share one last thing. Junah's name, of course, is Junah Cygnus, as she was adopted into House Cygnus. Well, guess what? The name Cygnus literally means swan. So, just like the ugly duckling, Junah was accepted into a family of swans and took on their identity. For my 2 cents, this is really cool symbolism, and it's clear that the ugly duckling parable partly inspired Junah as a character. Now, to continue, there are comments that Junah makes here and there throughout the game that if you read between the lines, you can perceive a little bit of imposter syndrome at work. After she reveals to you her true form, she says, "It's never felt right to me disguising ourselves. Is being myself really so horrible? Is it so wrong?" Junah has an internal sweeping generalization that being herself is wrong, when in actuality, the idea of Nidia transforming to fit in is an act that doesn't actually say anything about the individual. It's just something that is, like how we put on clothes before we leave the house so we can exist in society. Obviously these are different things, but I feel like that comparison realistically is close to the ideology behind Nidia transforming. It's not so much that the real Nidia form is bad, it's more so that they transform so people don't get blinded by what they look like and then can't respect the content of their characters. Again, as an example, if you show up to a job interview with pajamas or sweats, they likely won't be able to look past that to see your qualifications, but if you wear the appropriate clothing, then they'll be able to evaluate the content of your character. Part of me wonders if Junah had been raised by her Nidia parents in a stable household, if she would have had this mental relationship with transforming. Is this relationship with transforming a universal Nidia thing, or is it just Junah's unique background that allows her to have this perception? I'm not exactly sure of the answer, as there isn't a lot of Nidia lore in the game, or other Nidia characters that we can draw evidence from. Jin is a tool, and Alonso doesn't really talk explicitly about what his feelings are about being Nidia. Regardless, let's get back on track. Junah's case of imposter syndrome is largely reflected in her actions more than the things she says. I think this connects to one of the most misunderstood parts of Junah's character, and that is her propensity for flirting, or when she turns on her seductive songstress persona. Junah, for the most part, doesn't flirt for fun or as a simple distraction. When I really took a second to think through the scenes, I realized that Junah almost exclusively flirts when she's in fear. Think about it. She does it when she's undercover around Luis a lot, both with him and his men. She does it when you catch her in Luis's study. She does it when the Magnus brothers are very close to finding out that the two of you are lying. The seductive songstress persona is Junah's defense mechanism. Here's some more evidence to support that notion. Just from what we see in the game, it's clear that Junah has an interest in the main character. But if you've noticed, she always pursues you in a way where she walks back her statements of interest and almost kind of hides it behind the mask of, "Oh, I'm just being playful." This is because Junah has a fear of abandonment due to her early childhood, and so instead of openly and honestly conveying interest, she plays around with you for the most part instead. You can kind of see this with the fact that every time you honestly express interest in her or say something extremely nice to her, she'll usually get a little bit uncomfortable. I believe this is a mix of her having trouble accepting praise due to her imposter syndrome and a general fear of abandonment, a deep fear that she actually is an ugly duckling. This actually comes to a head in your last conversation with Junah prior to the final confrontation with Luis. You meet outside of Rella's church, and she admits that she's been thinking of the future with you, but she shares that she keeps putting off talking to you about it, basically out of fear of what you may say. I'd argue that her admitting this is one of her most vulnerable moments in the game, on par with when she shows you her true self, because after so many conversations, she's able to state out loud that she's fearful of you not reciprocating interest or your story ending. If the imposter syndrome component to her character isn't quite fitting for you, I would implore you to think about it this way. Shouldn't the world's preeminent songstress be confident enough to say openly, honestly, hey, I want you, and I'm me, so you should definitely want me back? Junah would be confident enough to do that, except she doesn't actually believe and fully accept all of the things that the world thinks of her, because of her imposter syndrome. There's a bit of a cognitive disconnect for Junah due to the context of her background, where she doesn't fully embrace all that the world says she is. A quote of hers that stands out to me is when she says, "All I do is show the audience the me that I want to be." In spite of the fact that, in reality, that's who Junah really is. Instead of her perception of her true self only being her original form and the person she is away from the stage, the fact is that her true self is both that and the songstress on stage who captivated the country. It's sad because at the same time, Junah says, "Sometimes I think singing is all I amount to. It's lonely." So it's like Junah concurrently doesn't think her onstage songstress persona is her at all, and at the same time, that onstage persona is all anybody values about her as a person. While that is sad, it's honestly very beautiful that Junah is who she is in spite of these storms raging inside of her. You see, Juani Cygnus is bold as fuck. I know I keep mentioning quotes from her in this video, but this is partly because she says so many things that tell you a lot. In other words, basically none of her voice lines are empty of meanings or subtext. To continue, at one point Junah says, "The harder something gets, the more determined I am to see it done." Junah is indomitable in the pursuit of her goals, and I think this largely stems from her experience as a child. Junah survived and persevered through horrific circumstances, so I believe she's of the mindset now that she can achieve anything because she's already faced down and defeated her life's greatest trial, literally as a child. Her boldness and indomitable nature is most reflected in her archetype awakening scene. Junah's the only character in the entire game who's like, "Aight bro, you running archetypes? That shit's crazy, but bet, I could do that shit too though." Like, while she does have a background of studying magic and her sister is arguably the most knowledge mage in the kingdom, I don't think that's enough to justify this. After all, Grius had studied archetypes his whole life, but when he saw it, he didn't say right away, "I understand it now," and then transform. But Junah basically does that, and I think that's more than anything a testament to her indomitable mentality forged from the fires of a horrific childhood, and the many years afterwards spent rediscovering herself and the power she possesses to affect people's hearts next to Rella. Junah's blatant self-belief is awe-inspiring, and it's what allows her to so readily awaken. So you see, dualities and complexities exist within Junah perhaps more than any other character in the game. I've just finished saying that she has an awesome self-belief, but earlier in the video I was analyzing how imposter syndrome impacts her. So you might be confused on what my message or my final analysis is of Junah, but I already told you. She's the most human character in the game. What are we in real life if not walking contradictions and dualities? That complexity is the essence of being human. Our perceptions of others, our perceptions of ourselves, none of these are ever perfect or completely and cohesively following logic. The same is true for Junah. She has imposter syndrome and thinks the world only values her for her singing, and she doesn't take full responsibility for who she is on the stage. She's afraid of abandonment and charms her way out of precarious situations. Yet, at the same time, she has a self-belief and a capability worthy of the world's greatest songstress. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but a persona is defined as the aspect of someone's character that is presented to or perceived by others. Junah possesses many personas within her soul: the famous songstress, the seductive flirt, the hero who champions hope, the the vulnerable friend who supports and looks out for yourself in the Magnus brothers. This is why one of her archetypes is called Persona Master. She's exactly that. She's the master of situationally shifting her disposition for different scenarios. In other words, when she says the line, "This will be the performance of a lifetime," I believe that this is essentially her ethos. She's constantly swapping out and wearing different masks of her persona and performing. This is also reflected in her gameplay. Her archetype is literally based around swapping out different masks for different situations. This feels like very deliberate game design. But while she believes that this means that nobody knows the real her and that the real her is only what she keeps hidden away, her vulnerable Nidia form with a history of being unwanted and a slave, this is where she's wrong. The real Junah is the entirety of all of her personas and all of her history. Her performance of a lifetime is her performing as Junah. I want to leave you with this. The pursuit of trying to match who we perceive ourselves to be and who others think we are is the defining human journey. Now, does all that we've discussed about Junah make sense? Only if you consider that she's meant to be human just like us. Junah's character beneath the surface makes sense because it doesn't make sense. Make sense? Okay y'all, so this video is the second in a series where I'm doing a deep analysis of every major character in this game. Definitely feel free to comment which characters you'd want to see next, and I will take it into consideration. My people, I can't say it enough, thank you so much for watching. I love chatting and connecting with you all so much. Let's keep things going, and if you're watching and you're not subscribed, come right in and join us. Subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. You all are the main reason that I make these videos. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and let me know. Check out some other videos on my channel for more content like this, and have a great day, night, or morning, and remember to be kind and thoughtful. Peace.
And you personally saved me from danger back there. I'm terribly grateful to you. You're lucky, really. I'll have you know I'm rarely this candid.